interesting and informative session today. And we want to thank our guests from USDA to joining us today, as well as Tom Temin, who is actually going to be our moderator. With that said, this meeting is being recorded. And number two, we are having this session in collaboration with Federal Insights Exchange. So with that said, I want to turn it over to April Davis, who will give us an overview of the FIE.
Morning, everybody. You hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Okay, thank you so much. Now my video is not working, but I'll go ahead and proceed. Many of you guys know me. I'm the professional staff partner to the Federal Insights Exchange programming, and we're delighted to have had the support of the COI and collaborating on promoting this particular meeting for you all. One of the main goals of ACT-IAC is the advancement of government services through cooperative actions of government and industry. With that, we like to foster better communication between industry and government members, and the FIE supports the goal by focusing on bringing industry and government together for short duration programming where agency leaders can share priorities, challenges, and success stories on topics critical to their agency. With that being said, next slide, Nancy. The USDA FIE planning team was put together and led by Cindy Bishop of Leidos, and we meet bi-weekly for 30 minutes on Tuesdays at 12:30. Our next meeting, as you can see on the screen, will be October 3rd at 12:30. And if you'd like to join the USDA FIE team and collaborate and build programming around USDA priorities, please reach out to me. My information is on the screen as well, and we'd love to have you engage. Thank you so much for letting me share the USDA with you all this morning.
Thank you, April. Now I'm going to talk briefly at a high level about our networks and telecommunications COI. The first thing I really want to say about our COI is that in 2023-2024 year, our objective is really to re-energize our COI. In the past, the focus has been primarily on transition to the EIS contract. And for those in telecommunications, I know that you've been following that, and a lot of that transition is already done. The government has extended the due date for transition until last date, I believe it's in May of 2026. But in the meantime, our focus this year is really to start talking about new issues that are going to be facing our government customers and actually citizens. So that's really going to be our focus. We will still touch upon EIS to some extent, but we want to move forward. So that's really what our objectives are for the year. And as you can see, our mission statement is just standard. We're supposed to be the honest broker and provide information. With that said, I want to introduce our COI. First, Robert Sears is our government chair. He's from NOAA. Erica Jacobs is our government vice chair. She's from the Department of State. Steve Mathern, he is our industry vice chair from AT&T. Deidre Murray is our programs co-chair from her own company. Lee Mosier is the programs co-chair, and she is from Fortinet. And Ginger Crawford is our communications chair, and she's from GDIT. This year, we have two projects. And as I said previously, our objective is really to start talking about new issues or issues that are facing the government community with networks. So the first one is the operational use of non-terrestrial networks. I know that a number of you work in agencies or you have customers that are in agencies that they really have difficulty with connectivity using the standard terrestrial networks or wired or even wireless to get to the customers. So there are new things, there are new ways to do that. And as you know, satellites, I know that you've heard of Starlink. And then there are other similar companies that are providing certain other methodologies for getting to the customers. And by the way, that the satellite is not just the only one to do that. So our overall goal this year is we're going to examine and assess through various use cases. I know that NOAA, where Robert works, has a big emphasis on doing satellite services. During the year, our deliverables are going to be a panel presentation from principals on the use cases and experiences, and a playbook guidance documenting our case studies, technical deployment, and statistics. Our second project is retirement of legacy copper networks and TDM circuits, which have been around for a very long time. What's going on right now is that the traditional LECs, exchange carriers, they are starting to phase out the legacy copper networks because of the cost. So there needs to be an alternative solution. In addition to that, even if they're not phased out, the costs of the copper circuits are going up because they're becoming more difficult to maintain. So even before that, those circuits get retired, that it's going to have an impact on our customers. So that's what we're trying to look at this year. We know that we have a lot of customers out there. I see it almost all the time, that they need alternative solutions to the legacy networks, TDM circuits. So our deliverables during the year will be, there are plenty of news and articles written about this, because this issue not only affects the government, but it also affects the commercial sector. We're going to look at possible solutions. We're going to have a case study, and it's going to be from a study in Alaska. The case study is actually going to be from our sponsor for the program, which is the Forest Service. Forest Service has a lot of these issues right now because of where they're located, and the old circuits to their fire stations in the forest are being retired. And then after that, we will have a strategic planning template and a playbook that we will provide. So in addition to those main two topics, we also want to have a number of other events during the year. So today is really our kickoff. We're having USDA's network transformation, and we're having Gary Washington, who is the CIO of Agriculture, and Dave Peters, who's the Deputy CIO, who are going to join us today to talk about issues and what the future looks like for USDA in networks. Then we're going to have two sessions on SD-WAN. We know that SD-WAN is a technology that's already out there, and for those agencies which have not gone that direction, they will most likely move in that direction, because when you move to the cloud, which most of the agencies are, if they have not already, that SD-WAN is really the best solution for that. So the first thing we'll have, it's going to be two sessions. We'll have a case study, which is possibly going to be USPS and DHS. USPS has probably more SD-WANs than anybody. They have 30,000 sites across the country. But then we also want to talk about what's next, because SD-WAN, it's not going to be a static technology. So we want to bring in leading SD-WAN OEMs. I know that Fortinet has already agreed to do that, thanks to Lee Mosier. And so that way the community can start hearing about not only what there is today, but where we're moving forward. Then we also want to talk about network modernization with the focus on communications. So we'll have a number of speakers there that are listed. The other thing is there, why that's important, is that under network modernization, we know a lot of agencies are moving forward with modernizing their environment, really their infrastructure. A lot of it has to do with applications, but we also have to make sure when they upgrade their applications that they don't forget the network, because the upgrades to the applications invariably will have a impact on the ability of the network to handle the traffic. Then, as you heard, one of our first project is satellite and/or wireless networks. Robert Sears, who's our program sponsor, he's going to talk about that with a case study. So that's how we're going to get feedback on our process. And then After that, we're going to do TDM retirement, which I said again, the project sponsor is Laura Hill from the Forest Service, and she's going to do a possible case study. We have a number of other topics that we're considering during the year. One of them is zero trust, but we always welcome ideas from members of our COI as well as other members of ACT-IAC to give us information or recommendations for additional topics. With that said, I want to turn it over to Steve Mathern, who is going to introduce our panel presentation today.
Perfect. Richard, thanks so much. And to everybody who's joining online, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I think that we're going to have a really fun, exciting, and interactive panel discussion with Gary and Dave Peters. So again, reiterate my thanks for Team USDA joining and participating with the Networks and Telecommunications Community of Interest for ACT-IAC. So by way of introduction, Gary Washington, who's the CIO over at USDA, is also the president of the ACT Executive Committee. So a true serial volunteer within the world of industry and government collaboration. So Gary, thanks so much for joining. Gary probably needs very little introduction, and I've had the distinct pleasure of working with him for a number of years. But I'm going to give you an introduction, anyways, Gary. So Gary was selected as the USDA CIO back in February of 2018. Gary was formerly the CIO for the USDA Animal Plant Health and Inspection Service, aka APHIS, and has also served as the CIO and director of the Information Technology Division for USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Prior to his appointment at the CIO of the USDA APHIS and NRCS, Gary was a portfolio manager in the Electronic Government Office in the Executive Office of the President at OMB, where he's responsible for managing the internal effectiveness and efficiency portfolio. Additionally, Gary managed the financial management, HR, and infrastructure lines of business and eGov initiatives. Gary has spent 5 years in private industry prior to his government role, and then 10 years as a computer operator and command control specialist with the Air Force. Gary is a wonderful supporter of ACT-IAC and truly a blessing to have talk to us a little bit about the modernization and transformation that's occurring over at USDA. But wait, there's more, right? So Gary's been kind enough to invite Dave Peters to join him. So Dave serves as the Associate CIO for the DIS, the Digital Infrastructure Services Center at USDA. Dave started in this role fairly recently in 2020. So in this role, Dave leads all enterprise hosting, network, and enterprise cloud application solutions. Prior to joining USDA, Dave served as the Deputy Executive Director over at GSA for their Center of Excellence, where he led all engagement operations from concept to completion. Dave joined the GSA TTS COE in November of 18 and led the Lighthouse engagement with the Department of Agriculture. And in this role, Dave led 6 IT modernization teams, covering over 150 staff, contractors, and USDA detailees to drive enterprise transformation via cloud adoption, data analytics, contact center consolidation, and increased customer experience management. Prior to his role at leading the TTS COE, Dave led the telecommunications supplier engagement responsible for $3.5 billion in annual spend for the federal government, leading the Enterprise Mobility Program and FSSI Wireless. Dave was the federal government's first mobile category manager and was a 2014 Fed 100 award winner. So a storied career from Dave as well. So Tom Temin has graciously volunteered to moderate this discussion. And Tom is the host of the Federal Drive and managing editor over at the Federal News Network. Tom has a long and storied career in journalism, covering all mediums, whether it's print, online, or live on the air. And you can catch Tom live on the air from 6 to 10 a.m. on 1500 AM, or stream the show, Tom Timmins Federal Drive online at federalnewsnetwork.com. So, gents, thanks so much again for joining us today. I think that this is going to be a really fun discussion, and I'll remind the folks who are listening along, there will be an opportunity for some Q&A. If you'll drop your Q&A in the chat, Nancy's going to be curating some of those questions, and Tom will ask us at the end. But Dave, Gary, Tom, the floor is yours. Excited to hear about transformation within the USDA enterprise.
Okay, thanks so much, Steve. Yeah, thanks for that great introduction. I really like this topic. I have to tell you a little bit of a quick story. Maybe Tony Bardo is around somewhere in this audience. He'll remember this, but I gave a talk many years ago at a lunch meeting of something called the Telephonic Old Crows Association, I think they called themselves. And this was in the days of transitioning from FTS and, should everyone have a telephone on their desk? I mean, that was a question the government asked at one time. Does everyone really need a telephone? And that was followed 20 years later by the question, does everyone really need to have an email account? And so these things have a way of catching up with us. Although I must say that, and that meeting took place at a hotel that's long since torn down on what is now the waterfront. And so in many ways, the kind of networking technologies that we have today that we're deploying throughout the federal government that do so much function, have so much power and so much bandwidth, kind of echo the difference between the current waterfront development that we have in DC and what it was 20 years ago when, you could get crab legs for $10. But it was kind of a rundown zone, not a lot of bandwidth. So a parallel there. I don't know if the dial tone, that era still exists, but here we are in the modern era. And so I want to talk about, our topic is USDA, and it's great to talk about USDA because it's an agency that like half the world is not mad at the moment, and every other agency we could talk about for one reason or another, not necessarily justifiably, but people are mad at it for some reason and it gets paraded across cable TV, not so much for the Department of Agriculture. And I think to understand what's going on in the networking world there and what Dave is directly working on and that Gary is overseeing, it's probably worthwhile reviewing the scope and reach of USDA as a physical operating entity, because that'll give you some sense of why what they're doing on the network is so important. So Gary, why don't we start with you and just review the structure, the locations, the geographic spread that is pretty impressive and it's probably worth reviewing.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tom. And I would say Steve has a way of making us sound very, very important. So with his introductions. But anyway, so USDA has over 100,000 employees, and we have a international presence as well as CONUS presence. We have 24 staff offices and 24 agencies and staff offices as well. And the large majority of USDA employees are spread all over America. And, we support the farmers, ranchers, foresters, scientists, animal and plant health employees, and others. We provide those services to just about everybody in this country. And we help other people abroad with their distribution of those services as well. So that lays out a general scope of what we do. Everything that when American citizen gets up every day, there's something that the USDA has something to do with that they take part of, whether it's what they eat, what they drink, and the safety of that, so forth and so on.
And I think it's worth also, if you would, just to elaborate on the physical locations, because I think you have more locations and more counties and zip codes than Social Security, right?
Yeah, we have, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have somebody in every single county in this country.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have an office just about in every county in this country.
All right, so that's a lot of telephone exchanges to rip out. As the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's 40,000 counties, by the way, if anyone plus or minus. So it's a lot of, it's a big country. All right, Dave, let's talk about USDA Net. And this is a massive project and you are well along in it. And let's talk about the high level view of it, and maybe we'll get down to some of the functional technologies and more important, what is yet to be done with it.
Yep, you bet, Tom. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Yeah, supporting that enormous operation that Gary spoke of, as far as USDA Net, we're in a very active state of transition. So in those 40,000 counties that you mentioned, we actually have about 10,000 current site locations. And we're consolidating the number of physical locations because some of those are redundant of having more than one mission area or agency in the same location. So with this consolidated network of collapsing 17 separate networks down into one large strategic enterprise network that reflects the USDA IT strategic plan, we have implemented all of the core services required to do that. We've submitted over half the orders for those locations, and we'll have a big chunk of those done by the end of this calendar year in terms of implemented. We've already started transitioning sites to support that. So a lot going on. Many of the core services that were required to serve as the minimum viable operating or components to support that site transition already done. Site orders underway, and enormous amount of coordination, but absolutely reflects the strategic plan of USDA.
And I think it's important to define the terms a little bit, maybe more precisely. You have 17 networks now. You're not integrating them, but you're replacing them with a single unified network.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, and if you think about all of the EIS transitions across the federal government, we're the largest one that went strictly with a transformation and modernization effort. And we are collapsing those 17 networks that reflected our business models of, say, a decade or 2 decades ago when networks was awarded into more of an enterprise approach. What we're trying to drive ultimately is improved service delivery. All those customers, those citizens that Gary mentioned, we're trying to drive increased value to our internal mission area customers that leverage that network to increase that those service delivery. And then finally, we are establishing a foundational network. So the network can serve as a service delivery platform for security and modernization of applications across the USDA enterprise.
And give us a sense of what the set of core services, the minimal viable services that you are making vendors deliver to each location.
Yeah, so the core services starts with, many of the folks out there are familiar with the MTIPS concept. So we've got to have trusted, secure internet access. And then simultaneously, because this is transformational, we've got to, every single endpoint that's operational today has got to continue to be operational during this transition, during this multi-year transition. So we've got gateways that link both the modernized network with the legacy networks. And so those are the two entities. And then as we continue to roll out sites, the remaining core services that are being implemented in process include things like domain name service, remote access, and similar services.
Is it fair to say, and this question just came to me, that if the same topology and the same technology is going to all of these different sites, all 40,000 of them, I guess, then is it remote access anymore for everyone? In other words, is there any functional difference or operational difference from some distant zip code in some little county where the farmers come in versus, Washington, D.C. or Detroit?
I think you're in the introduction, the speakers talked about software-defined networking, where we are as an enterprise and where we're going. And those SDN capabilities of today are what's allowing that ubiquitous and more consistent service delivery to be able to go to any endpoint independent of its urban or geographically dispersed location. So that's really a big part of what we're doing to execute our mission.
And Gary, let me ask you too, because one of the great phrases for this kind of deployment is get it right once on a small scale, and then once you know that's correct, then scale quickly and in large quantity. And agencies sometimes do that. Sometimes the more they scale, the worse things get. So from the CIO standpoint, what are the metrics you're watching, and how do you ensure that every time there's an order and an installation that it's what it's supposed to be, and that, you know, that the scaling is maintaining its true shape to what it is you envisioned for one by one?
Yeah, I think at the high level, Tom, we all agree with our vendors that the immediate goal is to have 80% of the network transitioned and modernized by December of 2024. So that's the goal. And we have some milestones that we're going to meet in October and December in terms of how many sites we have successfully transitioned and monitor the improvement of performance to those sites. So all the way down from our political leadership to myself and Dave, all of us are holding appropriate people accountable in terms of meeting our milestones, and more importantly, making sure that as we transition, we're providing a better customer experience out in the field to our customers, because that's one of the main things, is a secure, improved customer experience to our customers out in rural America.
Yeah, I can imagine too that, you know, you probably would hear from a local congressman or something if something was wrong in his or her district and the farmers had trouble getting the service they needed from USDA. You'd probably hear about it eventually.
Yes, we would. You know, the customers that I have had the privilege to speak with, you know, all, you know, unanimously said they want to have a opportunity to have a online, quick, responsive experience with USDA, as they do with their technology that they have at home, or what they do when they do their banking, apply for a loan, or go to the ATM. You know, that's the kind of response they want. So that's what we're aiming to. That's our target.
And just as an aside, it's probably fair to say that the average farming operation nowadays is a pretty technologically intensive affair. And
Oh,
just
yeah.
as the phones out in rural America are no longer dial-up phones you put a quarter in, neither are the farmers coming in with a pitchfork and a load of hay. These are
Absolutely.
very intensive operations with micro types of irrigation and geographic information system support for everything they do. It's a science now.
Yes, it is, absolutely. And you know, you'll be surprised in terms of sensors and other emerging things, what they use in addition to what we provide them from a network perspective, because that rides off of what we're implementing right now.
And David, what are some of the special requirements of, say, like I think we mentioned Gary was at APHIS at some point. There are operations that are not directly, well, they serve the oversight function that USDA does of, you know, food inspection, animal inspection, and this kind of thing, where you do have sensors and you have activity data reported back, as opposed to, say, delivery of loan information, that kind of thing. What are some of the special requirements out there that that might stress the requirements for the network itself?
So in terms of some of those special requirements, is we've got to support the legacy with the new. So there's, you know, we've got to support all the legacy protocols. We're looking to support the new protocols that enable the geospatial information support systems that you referenced, that enable the precision agriculture, which allow the tractors, the combines to know on a row by row and nearly plant by plant basis of where everything is. You know, so you've got some farmers that continue to go to the county offices and report for crop reporting, crop insurance, crop loan applications on a paper basis. You've got others that just that auto downloaded straight from the tractor, and it goes straight into the systems. And you can't draw a line in the sand and support some and not the other. So really the challenge as we're going into this SDN enterprise network configuration is being able to continue the legacy with the old, legacy with the new, and support all protocols, all applications. So it really requires an extensive partnership with our mission area customers, because they understand the applications and we're building that secure foundation to enable it.
Because even as late as 5, 6, 7 years ago, USDA, certain employees that were doing inspection type of work and data gathering had mobile devices. I mean, you're not starting from a basis where they were clicking into a teletype. You're moving from a mid-level technology of, say, 7 to 10 years ago to right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a wide breadth. It goes back. Some have had the mobile devices, some still handle paper, and some, those mobile devices collect and do it on their own. There's not even human interaction required.
Yeah, so the chicken even says to the guy, "Why are you still using paper?" You know, the other chickens we hear from, they're feeding their data right into a mobile device, or, you know, the Bluetooth chickens maybe might be next, and you can really speed things up. All right. And by the way, you know, people, if listening, we have a really big crowd today. There's looks like 70, 75 people on. You know, please send in questions, because you won't get these two guys together with all their knowledge very often. In fact, I'm recording it myself. You might be on the air here. The question of network resilience is always something. And those factors that can affect resilience have multiplied thanks to the cybersecurity threats and multiplying threats, and also the variety of media that I'm presuming you are using too. The physical media, it could be satellite, it could be, there's still copper some places, as we said at the outset, and cable and the rest of it. So talk about resilience, and also in the cybersecurity context here. Maybe Gary, you want to try a stab at the high level?
Yeah, I when we started this, cybersecurity was number one priority, you know, in terms of making sure that as we roll this out, we meet all our we exceed all our cybersecurity requirements as we implement, you know, zero trust, you know, Executive Order 14028, you know, requirements as they apply to FISMA, those kinds of things. And that also applies to, you know, like you said, you know, securing data with drones, satellites, sensors, those kinds of things. So we are working with our vendors to make sure that as we move forward, that's you know, part of what we implement as well in partnership. So our CISO, Janelle DeVore, works very closely with Dave in terms of making sure that you know, those devices are secure, as well as, you know, what we implement during this rollout. And we do have to have a resilient network, and we do have to be able to function, you know, at almost 100% of the time, in terms, you know, just to be able to meet our mission delivery requirements. Because, you know, as people need food and nutrition assistance, you know, farmers apply for loans, we have animal and plant health emergencies, you know, we can't let, you know, our network be the reason that doesn't happen. So Dave, you want to expand on that?
You know, Gary, I think you really hit the nail on the head. And I would just add that, you know, cybersecurity and resilience were the themes that really brought all of USDA together around this. You know, Gary talked about the partnership with CISO. It really, you know, we're establishing that strong digital infrastructure foundation so that our CISO can then ensure that we are compliant, that we are secure, and then we can use that delivery platform as a means of further implementing capabilities such as zero trust in the future.
Yeah, maybe if you would, I want to do more on cybersecurity, but I want to hear more about the media that are involved here, because of the widely varying situations you actually have.
You know, so in terms of connectivity and how our customers, our end users, both internal and external, establish it, you know, we want to really be media ubiquitous, so that if, you know, whether it's those chickens with the Bluetooth, or whether it's our farmers and food inspectors with the mobile devices, or it's intelligent sensors, they can, you know, it's any connectivity, anywhere, any application, and that resilient, secure foundation is what enables that capability.
Okay, sorry for that duck out there. I had a sort of a family emergency phone call, which only lasted about 30 seconds. So we're back with you. Yeah, so there's a variety of media. Another follow-up question I had, because the question of the SNAP program came up, major program, a lot of dollar value. and that is delivered and operated at the retail setting almost everywhere. Is that part of USDA Net too, or how does that figure in?
So the Food and Nutrition Services, which is the missionary owner for the SNAP program, indirectly, yes, we support, as Gary mentioned up front when he talked about, food distribution, food inspection, food wholesale oversight. We absolutely support the SNAP program and FNS. I know as they're developing significant capabilities to better serve their customers, we're the digital infrastructure supporting them. So whenever there is any type of process, whether it's at a retail or whether it's registration, our digital infrastructure is absolutely supporting FNS and the SNAP program.
Okay, and here's a cybersecurity question which came in from the audience for Dave. You referenced the importance of secure MTIPs within the USDA Net. How do you envision USDA Net architecture evolving to support TIC 3.0 architectures? I guess that's coming through CISA and so on.
Yeah, so we've got the TIC architecture defined. I welcome that question and probably want to take that, follow that on off-site. I can't answer the specifics of it, but I know that our director, John Donovan, and Deputy Director, Dan Crossan, have partnered extensively with our CISO, as Gary referenced earlier. And so we're going to be compliant. We're going to be more efficient. The one thing I'll say is as we continue to become more cloud in our core, we need more efficient traffic patterns, and that begins with offloading traffic in the most efficient manner. And so they could probably talk to more of the specific technical aspects of our architecture, but there is a more modern architecture with USDA Net as we evolve over our legacy UTN approaches, so we can be more effective in how we handle that type of traffic.
All right, and let's move to the big question. I think most of the people online are vendors. And so there's always an acquisition strategy and a vendor strategy behind all of this. And you are well along. So it's not like something you're putting out fresh RFPs to do, but maybe describe what your contracting and acquisition strategy has been, how that supported your vision of what you wanted to end up with USDA Net. And if you've been using EIS, what do you know that half the government still doesn't know yet about EIS?
Well, in terms of the acquisition, I think most people look at it. This was it was primarily a single award because we did have a single award on EIS, but we've got many industry partners that we are relying on. A project of this size, we're still heavily engaged with our incumbent provider. We've got multiple industry partners which continue to help us with manage our project plan. For every single site, there's multiple orders that need to take place in terms of the network, the managed service. And so we've got industry partners that are helping us process. We've got about 4,000 orders in process to date. We've got another 3,500 site orders to go. They're helping us then manage the multiple phases that reflect each order in terms of doing test and turn up, in terms of giving needed technical information on a site-by-site basis. And so we have what we believe we have the appropriate roster of industry partners in place. We could not be here where we are today with the tremendous progress we've made without them. And so this is a very, very big project, and it's an industry partnership. And so we appreciate industry's tremendous partnership all along the way.
And maybe describe a typical order, because you're ultimately buying a service, but to undergird that service, there must be some deliverable of gear, because whatever gear is in place for the 17 old networks probably isn't compatible with what you're doing now.
That's a great point. So an order is it's a lot more complex than it is you may think about on a consumer basis. So with the new network requires a new physical connection. It requires a new device. It requires confirmation. We talked about the legacy protocols and the new technology standards. We've got to make sure on every single site basis that we're able to manage and support So there's extensive testing that's required on a site-by-site basis. We typically have 3 major milestones. There's the network connect. When any type of site is activated, we've got to confirm that the network is installed and it works. We've got to then establish that the new service edge device, the equipment, the router is installed and has connectivity and it's working. And then we've got to activate the site, and we've got to make sure that the critical applications are working for that site and for the USDA enterprise. So there's a lot that goes on in an individual order to make sure that it works.
And Gary, I'm curious about if there's a data architecture that goes along with this, and I have a reason for asking that question at some point, but local sites generate data that they need to process. There's also the enterprise data, which is the collected data from all the sites, which is very important to USDA. So is there a data strategy? And we've talked about zero trust. There's got to be cloud in here somewhere.
Well, there is a data strategy for USDA, which is why USDA net is important, because USDA has an ungodly amount of data that it transmits amongst each other and with academia and other institutions as well, and especially a lot of scientific data. And that data consumption is increasing as we speak. So yes, we do have a data strategy. We are working to have a data architecture, a more up-to-date data architecture for USDA as well. In regards to the data that Dave deals with on a daily basis, his team manages that very well. But overall, strategically, the data that we create, consume, and deliver, we have to be, we're going to use this modern infrastructure to make sure that, we do the things that we need to do on a daily basis.
And how does cloud computing figure into this whole grand design here?
Cloud is huge, because Dave oversees that as well, and a large amount of our data is stored in the cloud, and we have a multi-cloud environment here at USDA, and we're very proud of the strides that we've made to be able to manage that in a cost-effective manner. So, Dave, you want to add any more to that?
Yeah, I think so. So Gary and the OCIO leadership established the USDA IT strategic plan. And so first, from a data perspective, goal 5 is enable data-driven decision making. So everything we do operationally in terms of the network, we're working with GSA to aggregate and then evaluate and then manage the data on a mission area basis. The needs and the footprint of USDA's operating environment, as Gary said, is moving from a legacy and data center driven architecture to a hybrid cloud environment, and eventually it will be more of a commercial cloud driven environment. But we've got to move at the speed and at the demands and needs of our customers. And so right now we're very much, when it comes to data, when it comes to cloud, in a hybrid environment. And that really reflects the IT strategic plan that USDA has.
All right. And, talking as we did earlier about the telephone old crows and the prior generations of these types of contracts going back to FTS, otherwise unadorned. I think that goes back to 1963 or something. I wasn't even around then, at least not in Washington. But I wanted to ask you, what is the future of the telephone in an agency as widely distributed as USDA? Because it could, at one time, the telephone exchange and the first 3 digits, who's calling, 703, 695, Pentagon, and so on throughout all of the federal agencies. That's still somewhat true, but because of the scattering of people through COVID and just the ease of everyone using their own cell phone just makes life easier than being tied to the desk phone. Nobody has to listen to, voicemail that much anymore. Yet the government, I think, in people's eyes, is a presence that is embodied by physical structures. So what's going on with the desk phone and the traditional telephone?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. So the the footprint and the use of the traditional telephony handset on the desk, I think is changing very significantly. And if you looked at, any executive or any manager or analyst at USDA, and you look at their calendar and you look at when they take calls and how they take calls, and the information, it's, no one dials into 800 conference numbers anymore. It's all, Teams and WebEx and Zoom meetings. We still have contact centers, and we still will be in that hybrid environment. And much like we talked about for cloud and data, telephony is in a current hybrid environment. So we've got to be able to take calls. We've got to have contact center staff that in some cases are that have some legacy and intermediate capability. But those agents are also tied into very advanced CRM and cloud-based technologies as well, so they can have fingertip access to producer, wholesaler, distributor, and vital agricultural information at the fingertips. So it's, our requirements for USDA Net were all developed in a pre-COVID environment, and now we're living and operating in a post-COVID environment. And so that's another factor. So, the number of handsets you're going to see at USDA are going to continue to decline. They have not, and I don't see an immediate elimination of them, because we've got to continue to support and act in this hybrid environment. But we'll continue to serve and support in the needs of our consumers and customers that require multi-technology support.
Yeah, because you're always going to have those people that keep repeating the phrase, talk to a representative, talk to a representative, talk to a representative, as the chatbot tries to keep them occupied. Okay, we've got some questions coming in, some practical questions coming in from the audience. Here's one. As the USDA implements SD-WAN services through USDA Net, what role will carrier and access provider diversity play to ensure resilient services to your agency customers? In other words, if you need to switch, I guess, because of something, what is that part of the plan?
So redundancy is absolutely a critical part of the plan. We need, Gary talked about the high level of operations we need to sustain and support our USDA customers and consumers. And so, redundancy and resilience is absolutely a core part of our fabric. In terms of carrier diversity, probably not as much. In today's environment, you've got to ensure that the circuits are diverse, and so it doesn't necessarily require carrier diversity as it does operational and technology confirmation of diversity. So I would say it absolutely is part of our core fabric.
Okay, here's another one. Let's see. Okay, we talked about cloud. Let's see. All right. We can't have a discussion with a CIO and a deputy CIO without talking about still another topic that seems to be like ketchup. It goes with everything. And that is artificial intelligence. And is this playing any role in USDA Net in terms of maybe gathering the metrics and understanding what fixes you might need, or, some kind of a predictive analytics for the performance of the network, that kind of thing? Or you tell us.
I would tell you that as of today, artificial intelligence is not playing a role. That doesn't mean that won't happen in the future. Our USDA is getting its arms around taking a very structured and organized approach to AI, because we have a great number of scientists that are currently using AI. We want to make sure that we're doing things the right way, and that we're not implementing AI wherever it is without any unintended consequences.
Okay, Dave, so that means you neither, right?
Yeah, so yes, and especially, we hear a lot about generative AI. And so I would say that is not part of our infrastructure, of our digital infrastructure. There are parts of our service desk, service delivery, where with our partner who is managing our network, there's escalated triangulation and triage that has some AI capability, but not of the part, as Gary indicated, not the part that's making the headlines and in the news. And so we're taking a very measured, as Gary said, very measured approach to AI.
Okay, I've got a question too. I think in looking at USDA as a model of a federation of many different missions and many different large and small sub-agencies, that's the characteristic of a lot of big departments, some of which have not modernized their networks or they're modernizing networks for only one mission. What would your advice be to get a handle on this as a, for lack of a better word, a political leadership, and I mean that within the operation of the agency, and getting everyone to understand that they've got to play under this new architecture? And whether you're APHIS or you're the Farm Bureau or you're the Agricultural Research Service, whatever it might be, this is the network that's going to be for everyone. Where do you start to get everyone to buy in if you are operating at the large departmental level, headquarters level?
Well, I mean, you had to tell them how they're going to benefit from this. And, you know, I don't think it starts with a technology discussion. It's a business discussion. You know, they're all contributing to this modernization. So, you know, we have to be clear, you know, about how this is going to benefit not just them and their employees, but the people they serve. And those are the conversations that we've had. I mean, you know, money comes into this as well. I mean, as a department right now, over a 10-year period, once this is implemented, we say we plan on avoiding $740 million worth of costs, which is going to drive the cost of the network down, the cost of their services down, you know, dramatically. So, you know, what worked for us was just building that business case and briefing that to our leadership in a language that they understood, you know. And once that occurred, you know, and we continue to communicate this to the agencies and staff offices, you know, and for the most part, you know, people have been on board and they're anxious to see this happen. Dave, you got anything you want to add to that?
Just to echo your statement about this is a business, you know, the business benefits are what needs to be identified. That's how you get people on board, as Gary said. You know, we run into technology problems every day and we fix them every day. We've got great people to take care of that. But trying to sell this to mission area customers that have incredibly vital, critical programs to execute, they don't care about the bits and bytes. They want to know that we are going to have a platform to serve their customers. So what Gary said about this is a business discussion and the benefits to them need to be first and foremost. That's where the answer begins and ends.
Right. At some point, you said you have that gateway going and both networks are running. At some point, you pull out the cable from the old one and you really have to know nobody will be able to tell. And have they been able to tell, or is it pretty much gone as you hoped?
To date, it's gone well. We have not had any applications shut down or any programs impacted by the site or core enterprise transition.
And maybe for our final point, I'd like to maybe ask you about the human capital part of this, because you have folks that are overseeing and operating this network. You can't personally go to every site and plug in the category 6 cabling and so on. So there's contractors doing this. But your own people have to oversee it. Has it demanded new technical skills, a different kind of person? What have been the human and IT staff implications of this effort, USDA Net?
Well, the organizational change component, it's just like what Gary said about being the business is the driver for doing it. And really what you're talking about, Tom, is the OCM has been the biggest challenge. Size and level of transformation are enormous challenges, but you know, changing the model of the organizational operations, both in the interim, as you talked about, and having, you know, when we do a site transition, we literally have to have a person on site. Sometimes it's from the mission areas, sometimes it's from one of my peers here under Gary, and sometimes it's a contractor who's literally doing that LAN cable movement from legacy to new. And you know, so that's the organizational challenge that we have during transition. And then post transition, as you referenced earlier, this is a managed services platform that we're evolving toward. So we no longer need the you know, high volumes of workforce that to manage and maintain routers on every single site across the USDA enterprise. And so, we are retraining, reskilling, and managing that organizational change as well.
Yeah, because people, Gary, I must imagine, feel a little bit insecure when they don't have a local IT guy anymore.
Well, yeah, that's true. And everybody wants their own person, but in addition to that, we have to make sure that the employees that this impacts, they understand they have opportunities, and they have an opportunity to retrain to do something else or to learn something new. So we have to manage customer expectations in regards to, Bob might not be sitting at your desk anymore, to our employee, our more internal employee opportunities, as well as them retraining and reskilling.
All right. Well, we've got just a couple minutes till the end, so I'm going to end our discussion here. David Peters, Gary Washington, thanks so much for really insightful discussion, and congratulations on the success you've had so far with USDA Net. And we'll have to dial up a few places and see how it's working. In the meantime, again, thank you so much, and I'm going to turn the meeting back over to Stephen Mathern.
All right, thanks, Tom. So Gary, Dave, thank you so much for being so generous with your time this morning, taking some time out to continue supporting ACT-IAC and specifically the Network and Telecommunications COI. I think Tom said it best. Look, the mission of USDA is really one without any contention. It's something that everybody is supportive of. I think that everyone is the beneficiary of, and it's a mission that touches every American, like you said, Gary, every day. So thanks for sharing, and thank you both for delivering that mission. Really appreciate all the fine work you all do, and especially spending some time with us this morning. So thanks so much. Before we break here, so I just want to remind folks on the bridge that there are some additional meetings for the NNT COI that are on the radar. So if you wouldn't mind, please just checking the website to make sure you're signed up for that. Richard talked a little bit about the two of our projects for this year. So the operational use of non-terrestrial networks, as well as the project focusing on the copper/TDM retirement. So if that's something that interests you, I would argue that that's going to touch all of us collectively on the government and industry side. But if it's of interest to you all, I'd encourage you to volunteer, to get engaged and support those projects. You can do that, again, via engagement through the ACT-IAC website. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day. Again, thanks so much to our moderator and speakers, and look forward to seeing you all in an additional or future Networks and Telecom COI discussion. Thanks so much, y'all.